I had a person tell me that one time. He was like, I've never killed very few deer in the morning. He's like, I shoot all my deer in the evening. And I said, well, when do you hunt? And he was like,
evening.
Well, after work in the evenings.
Yeah.
I think I see a pattern.
Yeah.
I think I see a pattern here.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours. But the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. Mm-hmm. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and I mean, with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, I mean, what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back.
Hey-o.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 116. Nick, thank you. We did our wardrobe change. Did our wardrobe changes? So
Did you?
Yeah, still the 20th. So we changed wardrobes.
That's funny that we do that.
Yeah.
I had a different shirt on for this morning then.
So this is coming out, the 28th? Is there 28 days in February this year? Yes. There always is.
Always 28.
Yeah.
Carry one leap year, yes.
It is the last day of February.
It is the last day of February. No leap year this year. For all of you who have birthdays on the 29th, sorry.
Happy March 1st.
Yes.
Was that last year?
I have no idea.
It's like
I can't keep up with
recently.
it. Was it every 4 years?
It's every
4 years, yeah.
My uncle's a leap year birthday.
Whoa.
Yeah.
On the 29th?
So he's like the same
Wow.
age as you now.
Yeah.
It's like a leprechaun.
Yeah.
That'd be so weird. That your birthday just doesn't exist for 3 years.
Yeah.
So when you do it, you're just either the 1st or the 28th?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I guess he
I'd go
picks.
for March 1st. It's cooler.
Yeah.
It's like
It
because
feels like spring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to be open-minded.
Yeah. Crazy. Anyways, it's still February, which means it's kind of doom and gloom. It looks doom and gloom outside still.
You got to stop saying that.
It's very cloudy and rainy.
Well,
you guys got to stop saying that.
I mean, Thursday's supposed to be like 75 and sunny,
It's
though.
sunny, and it's starting to get windy. That's how you know spring's coming around.
Get windy?
Just a steady breeze.
I mean, we really didn't have a winter.
It was pretty bleak.
Like that one little drop around Christmas. And that
Christmas
was
got
it.
real cold. Global warming.
That's it.
Climate change.
Climate change.
It's been the warmest
Outdoor.
February of my life.
We were like 5, so.
I know. But I'm saying it's different.
Why don't you
It's
just
weird.
keep that to yourself, bro? We're just talking about weather over here, dude.
Damn.
70 degrees, though.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh, you said warmest?
Yeah.
I think you said worst.
No.
Worst February of my
No,
life.
no. It's been probably the best.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad
Good.
to hear
Thanks.
that.
Still have a girlfriend?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Celebrated Valentine's Day this weekend in Pittsburgh. It's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, there you go.
What'd you do?
We ate good tacos.
Yep.
Where at? Blue River? Or Bull River?
Bakersfield.
Okay.
And then we went to Bar Louie in the North Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got some drinks in us.
Uh-huh.
Classy.
Had a hotel room.
Whoa!
This is a PG-13 show here.
Yeah, we can't go that
Hotel
far.
room.
Young love.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You even old enough to get a hotel room?
What's the problem? She don't
Just
want
barely.
to. She don't want to come back to your mom's house, or
Well,
You're like, this is my apartment. She's
Yeah.
like at a Holiday Inn Express.
I have a cleaning lady.
By the way, we got to be out by 10.
yes. Yeah. So
fresh
Anyway.
sheets every hour.
Nice.
yeah, it's nice. Fluffing the pillows, Well, we are blessed to have an in-house guest today. Mr. Ryan Fuhrer, thank you
I'm here.
for
Yeah.
gracing our presence.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't really get the in-person guests very often.
Although we might have another one. Johnny Stewart. Might
Oh
be
yeah,
joining
Johnny.
us pretty
Mhm.
soon here.
He's working on
We're
the.
slowly coaxing people into the op. Once
He-
they realize, like, okay,
Yeah.
you guys are okay. Like, you're not gonna.
Johnny's currently
drug us down in the basement
excavating,
here.
and his boss wouldn't let him off. So
He is the boss. He owns the company.
his wife wouldn't let him off.
he made the decision. He couldn't make it.
Yeah.
Which I respect.
Yeah, if it rained more, I think he was off the hook, but it didn't rain enough, so he's got to dig.
So Johnny Stewart, like the game calls?
Johnny Stewart, as in Washington, PA, public land, big buck hunter, Allegheny National Forest.
I think different.
Different Johnny Stewart.
No, I mean, the old
Yeah.
game call thing. That's
Yeah.
what my,
Oh yeah,
and when I was a kid, I had
the old Johnny Stewart.
the Johnny Stewart.
They're still
you
around.
carried cassettes with you,
Yeah,
and I don't know, maybe like 150 batteries type of deal.
for the predator calls.
I used it for crow hunting. I didn't predator
Oh,
hunt when I
yeah.
was a kid, but I did a lot of crow hunting.
Yeah,
It was fun.
yeah.
It was a big green box. You remember it?
Oh, yeah.
I wish I had one. of
They're
those
still.
again.
I mean, Johnny
If
Stewart's
you see
still
one
around.
by it, I
Vaguely.
want it.
Does it look like a radio?
Sort of, but it had
Yeah.
a lid.
Mm-hmm.
You like
Yeah.
opened it up, and it was basically a cassette.
It was a
player,
cassette player.
and it had
With
like a cord
speaker.
plugged in with a speaker.
I remember this.
Called it crows in.
Mm-hmm.
You could use it for other stuff too, right? Like
Yeah, they had
hunt.
different
Mhm.
coyote tapes and
That's
so
what
forth.
we used it for. Ours was like yellow, I think.
Back and rewinding it. Damn it.
Honestly, like then it would always like freeze up or skip or something. It was,
Yeah, those
we've come
things.
so far.
They weren't
Yeah.
built for cold weather.
No, right?
Yeah. Crazy. Well, so Ryan, obviously we've known each other for a long time, but not far from here, 10 minutes up the road
Yeah.
on the mountain.
Easy drive.
I guess before we dig into it, maybe give everybody listening a little background on Ryan's story. I don't know if you want to start with the story you told me, but that was pretty funny now that the statute of limitations is out.
Oh,
But yeah, I won't put you on the spot for that, but I'll
I
let
don't
you
care.
start wherever you want to start.
I mean, the background, like I've been doing this stuff my whole life, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the easy, quick story. That's the elevator speech, right?
That is.
I think the story you're mentioning, yeah, sure. I mean, I grew up in the woods type of deal. Like that was just like my fun stuff to do and learn all that. But you talking about when I shot my first deer.
I am.
Right? Yeah. So I got a bow and arrow when I was 7 or 8 years old and started shooting, and I just was fascinated with it. My parents didn't hunt. My dad didn't. It wasn't. I mean, when I say wasn't a hunter, I mean he hunted like small game, some, and deer hunted, a little bit type of deal. But I was just ate up with it, and I had a friend that had a bow shop. His dad had a bow shop, and I kind of hung out there, again, maybe, 5 miles up the road type of deal. And I got my first bow when I think I was 8. It was a Proline Intermediate. So I remember like everything very vividly. The whole autumn orange arrow, I remember 145 grain wasp broadheads, so imagine an 8-year-old, right? Like, I don't know, it was before they built anything for a youth.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Like there was nothing.
It was as tall as you, probably.
Yeah, I mean it probably still is, right? Like,
Yeah.
So
How old are you, Ryan?
46.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You got some years on Jeremy even.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll be 46 next month. So yeah. So what are we talking there? Do the math. 35 years ago.
Yeah. So in the 80s.
Oh yeah, definitely 80s. Yeah, mid 80s,
mhm.
right? So, I would just come home from school, and in October, my bus got home like at 3:30 or what have you, and we lived, in the mountain. We had neighbors, but they weren't like next door neighbors. I had plenty of woods to roam around in, and I was telling Jeremy, like I would go in the woods behind our house and just stay back there till dark type of deal. Like my parents didn't know, they got home from work after I got off the school bus. So this is where I hung out and did my thing, shooting at stumps. I shot at everything that my bow would allow me to shoot at. And, oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to watch that.
I remember this one time I shot a possum.
It's a groundhog, right?
It was a
Yeah.
groundhog call.
I remember walking along and there was a possum in a tree. Like I remember, I know, like looking back, I had no idea why he was there, but I was coming home right at dark and he was coming out of the tree, and I can vividly, this is how my mind works. Like, but there was a tree upright and there was another tree had like a blowdown, and he's coming down the blowdown, right? So he had been up there sleeping, looking back, and it's time to eat, right?
Yeah.
So he's coming down at night. It was like right before dark, and I remember like, whoa, something to shoot at, type, and he like saw me when I saw him, and he did the whole froze thing, from here to that wall 5 yards, and suck one right.
Just standing dead still.
Don't move, dude. Right between the eyes, type of deal. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It's deadly.
Yeah. Right. Like, so that type of stuff. But so this one time, same type of thing. I'm back there hunting, and when I say hunting, just I didn't sit still. I just kind of roamed around, and I guess that patch of woods is looking back. It's still there. There's probably 25 acres before you'll run to a house or something like that, and just one home. And then I knew him very well, and maybe another 150 acres behind that even. So it was very, very secluded. And the landowner where it was 25 acres, he planted corn. So through our woods was his cornfield type of deal, and I would just back and forth on that cornfield edge because the squirrels, I'd figured out very young that the squirrels would, either eat the acorns in the trees or they would run into the corn to get corn, right? Like, and they would be, and I did a lot of shooting and very little hitting, but I shot at a lot of stuff right along that cornfield. Like I literally cut my teeth along that cornfield. And this one day I'm milling along and I heard this rustling and, in the corn. Like, you know how loud dry corn is. And I'm like, whoa, I literally was standing next to a tree. I mean, maybe had, probably whatever I had on in school that day type of deal with I had an old camouflage jacket that somebody gave me. And I think I still have it actually. But I stand next to this tree and out comes a 4-point buck. And I'm like, whoa, this is like, I'm hunting now, man. Like, this is the real thing, right? Like, because I'd hung out at the bow shop, right? So picture this, 8-year-old, that's in bow season.
Yeah.
I hung out at the bow shop, and these older guys who I just idolized shot deer.
Yeah.
I didn't. You know what I mean? Like, I tried, I wanted to, but I didn't. And this buck has no idea I'm there. Like, looking back, I would only assume, like, the wind, the thermals, everything was perfect because he walked by me at, like, 8 yards. And, man, I mean, dude sunk an arrow, like right in behind the front shoulder type of deal. And he buried off and, just that fast it was gone. And I was like, whoa, I just shot a deer, So I had heard my dad's truck come home from work. I was close enough to where I could hear the driveway. He had a gravel driveway and I could hear him when he came home. And I just like vroom, ran as fast as I could to the house and, tell my dad, you're not gonna believe what I just did. And he's like, what'd you just do? I shot a deer. He's like, what? He's flipping out, because I'm 8 at the time. So now this is why I'm not so concerned with the whole legalities. Well, it was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But now we have youth seasons. So, it's
youth mentor.
Yeah, you have all kinds of seasons now. So now it's legal, then it wasn't. But my dad was very, he liked to not, he didn't bend the rules type of deal. And I was like, I shot a deer. He's like, you did what? Are you crazy? And then he didn't know anything about hunting really. I mean, a little bit. And he just like, did you hit it? I'm like, yeah, I hit it. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, yeah.
I hit him.
Yeah. And he comes out with me and we start looking around and, where was it at? And where were you? And the whole deal. And sure enough, I mean, we find blood very easily. And, we trail it and we go maybe, I don't know, 60, 80 yards type of deal, and there it's laying dead. My arrow's sticking out of it, maybe 8, 10 inches of penetration looking back, but I killed my first deer like that. And my dad is like so paranoid, like looking back, like he drug it out. We drug it out. We had a garage, and he's got it covered up in the garage. It was like we were hiding Jimmy Hoffa's body. He didn't know what to do with it. He calls the owner of the bow shop that I hung out at, is like, you're not going to believe this, but he shot a deer. He's like, my dad's like, he's like, don't worry about it. It's fine. I'll be down. We skunned it, and of course we ate it and everything like that. But yeah, that was my introduction into bow hunting at a very young age, and it wasn't a crossbow.
See? So I think what's so interesting about that story, Ryan, is like, first of all, like very untraditional of you as an 8-year-old coming from, a family that, your dad wasn't like engraved in that hunting side, but something kind of, tripped basically to where you're like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what eats me up on a daily basis.
I've thought about that a lot, given I've basically, that early age shaped, I would venture to say, almost everything I've done in my adult life, one way, shape, or form. So that archery shop played a huge impact. Some of the people there, there was a small group of guys that were actually part owners that shot like the IBO and stuff, and I would go with them, which led into my archery career, which in 2002 I was a national champion. Like that all, just played a part in it. But that connection to the outdoors, my parents were from like your area, North Huntington, Irwin. My mom and dad graduated from Norwin High School. Yeah. So again, my dad hunted some, my mom's family hunted some, but it was rabbits and grouse and, around the holidays, they would get together, but I mean, nothing like I do or we do to that. So I don't know what it was, man, but there was some undeniable thing when we moved up there when I was in 1980. My parents moved from the Irwin area.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 2.5, 3 years old type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's where I grew up in the mountains up there. And, I don't know, it's just undeniable, the attraction I had to till this day. I mean, I still feel the same way.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. And that apprenticeship thing, I think is what we were talking about, getting kids involved. And I think we started down, of course, social media started us down this path. Jeremy put a post and he pissed somebody off, and I was like, send him a text, like, good job, dude. Yeah.
Jeremy doesn't do
that.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound right.
So here's where I'm at with, we're looking at metrics and we're looking at state agencies, and that's my story into hunting. And I was hunting before that day, right? But I had whatever it was, I would go to that archery shop. I would meet adults that was out there doing it, and I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to learn it myself, and I didn't have anybody just to say, here, let me take you and show you how to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sort of apprenticeship is why here we are 35 years later sitting here talking about that day. That apprenticeship that I went through allowed me to evolve into the hunter I am. And I'm a very firm believer that, we're looking at the state agencies and the nonprofits, and everybody are looking at all the metrics on, we're losing hunters, and what do we have to do to keep people hunting? So let's give them more opportunity, and let's make them easier to accomplish their goal, to be a hunter, right? And the unmeasurable metric is just that apprenticeship, that evolution to become a hunter, the figuring it out on your own. Everything that's worth having comes with some sort of appreciation value. When you work for it, it's fun. I look at trust fund babies, right? Like I have a buddy that's a trust fund baby. He has millions and millions of dollars just handed to him, and he doesn't. I mean, he's a good dude, but he's never had to get up and go to work.
Yeah,
for
his work
anything,
ethic
right?
isn't there.
So, I got a Lamborghini. And I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but I'm not against these youth and mentors type seasons and let's make everything easier, but there's something to be said about the appreciation level that's going to keep people coming back. I think right now we're so focused as state agencies on right now we need to sell more license like next year. So what can we do to sell more license next year? What can we do to get more hunters next year or the year after? And they're not looking down the road at the end game 10 years, 20 years, right? And I really don't believe that just giving a kid a crossbow at 7 years old and taking them to a shooting house and sitting there with a heater while they're playing their Game Boy until the deer shows up and they shooting it is going to allow us to have 20-year results. I really don't believe
it won't. I mean, there's no traction there.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's just like anything. I mean, the easier it comes to you, the less effort you're going to put to get better at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, same with sports. I mean, you had some of the most talented kids in sports in high school and stuff that never amounted to anything because they never tried. It was so easy when then they go up to the next level and they get demolished.
Yeah.
Because they never worked at anything.
Right.
They didn't have to. Wasn't in their head.
And, to the post that Jeremy, I wanted to reply to it, and I kind of got sidetracked. And I started this whole give it 24 hours thing because I can get caught up in making posts on social media that really...
Jared and I are more of the shoot from the hip.
What was your post?
Which one was it? Was it the consultant one?
No, it was somebody had put the statistics up of Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the
70%. All you said was...
I said, just so you know, 70% of the archery kill was with a crossbow.
Right.
I said, I'll just leave that here. Yeah.
Right.
And then...
Yeah, it just blew up. And one guy in particular, I have a couple places to go with this, but one guy in particular was like, crossbows are great because they allow my 85-year-old dad to continue hunting. They allow, handicapped people who couldn't enjoy bow season to hunt. And they're also, this is his exact words, they're also a great way to introduce my children to bow hunting, of which all three I agree with the exception of, let me say this first. I do not think that the 85-year-old should have the crossbow. I mean, let me rephrase that. They should have the crossbow. And the handicapped people, they should have a crossbow. When it comes, is it a great way to introduce a child to bow hunting? Sure, it is a great way. But disregard what the other great way is, teaching them to shoot a vertical bow too, because that's how I was introduced, and that was a great way.
Yeah.
And when you look at license sales, the age demographic that sells the most license in the country right now are people that are my age. So guess what? They likely started bow hunting without a crossbow, and they're the people that are still out there doing it. So yes, it's a great way to get kids to bow hunt, but so is the other way. And I think we mistake, and this person said, you know, kind of to Jeremy, mind your own business because it's legal. Well, at some point, yeah, it's legal, but it's worth questioning, right? Like, I'm not saying, I mean, if the state agency said, you know, it's legal now to use bazookas to shoot squirrels. Well, they state it's illegal. Look out, you know, like, come on, man. Like, yeah, we're just questioning. Yeah, it's legal, but is this what we really need? Is this what we really want? Now, I know for sure this podcast or my opinion isn't going to change how state agencies look at anything. I hope somebody listening to this goes, you know what? Maybe I will give my 8-year-old a vertical bow and see what they can do. And if they're not ready to bow hunt at 8, maybe they shouldn't be bow hunting until they're 12 years old until they are ready. Let them tag along with you. I have 3 children. My oldest is 15 now. He's watched me shoot 3 deer out of a bow, or out of a 2-man ladder stand at the time with the middle section out of it. So it was only 7 or 8 feet off the ground. I mean, you know, we're bow hunting. He's sitting next to me. He watched me shoot 2 bucks and a doe. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't have to be a hunter. He completely enjoyed that. One of them I snort wheezed in. So he watched this whole experience. I mean, this whole thing play out with this 3-year-old buck and end up shooting him at 10 yards type of deal that probably took, you know, from the time we saw him to the time I sunk an arrow in him, 30 minutes. You know, he was 7 or 8 at the time. He watched that unplay. You know what I mean? That whole play unfold. There's a lot to be said to just take a kid hunting. They don't have to kill a buck with a crossbow. I mean, and they don't have to kill a buck with anything, right? Like, if we put them in front of it and constantly just hand them to it, I really don't think, you know, I mean, a small percentage may come back, but down the road, you know, it's just easy. Yeah. You know, don't downplay it. That's what I'm telling these guys out there. He also told you if you don't like the state's rules, then to stay out of his state.
Sure.
So you're not. You're not allowed in Ohio anymore.
Well, and I mean,
that's why I don't read these comments,
the way that it's looked at, right, is not that. You know, you could pick any weapon. You could pick straight wall cartridges in Ohio, because I know we've talked about this too. It's the fact that as we become more efficient killers, and yet the opportunities, whether it's bag limits or season dates or whatever, change to be more liberalized. How are those two things working together without having a negative effect on the resource? Right? I can't be more efficient at harvesting deer and have liberalization of bag limits and seasons. Now, the counter to that is, well, there's less hunters in the woods, right? That's why.
That's why a lot of this is happening.
Yes.
I mean, and they're doing twofold, right? There's less hunters, so they're doing everything they can to make it easier for somebody to become a hunter. And it also allows you, as you put it, to be more efficient as a killer.
That's
right?
it.
So
I think that's also true, like at the kids' age, and so like maybe you can defend it from your standpoint. Well, I guess you guys both have kids, but like the reason that or the justification that we've stumbled across, or that's been presented to, is like, as a kid, you know, you can kill a deer with a crossbow earlier than you could with a vertical bow, just purely because of the skill it requires and because of the, you know, the poundage to be able to draw back whatever it is, 45, 50 pounds is required.
I think it's 40 in the state of PA.
Yeah,
40, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how old do you have to be to go out and kill a deer with a crossbow? You could do it at 5 years old.
There's no, that's the thing with the mentor thing in Pennsylvania, as far as I'm concerned.
There's 3.
There is no it's up to the adult or the mentor to deem you responsible enough to be a hunter.
Like my oldest, Carter was 8 when he killed his first. He wasn't ready at 5, 6, or 7. Harlan was 5 when he shot his first doe.
Well, I mean, dude,
ready.
I was 12 when I shot my first doe.
As was I.
And it was, I mean, highly questionable whether I should have been bow hunting or not, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that out there. I mean, and again, what are we doing, right? Like, is this, you know, I mean, these kids are, you know, eating cereal, you know, and in their diaper, then we're taking them hunting the next day type of deal. Like,
Well, yeah. And
well, the question is because you're trying to capture their attention, the fear, and whether, and I think we're both in agreement with you. But the reason is they're like, well, we're afraid that these kids are going to get their attention is going to be taken by whatever it is. And if the earlier we can expose them to a successful hunting scenario, the likelihood of them grasping to that over XYZ other less desirable thing is greater.
I agree with you 100%.
Well, it's not my stance. I'm just saying.
No, that's where they're
yeah.
coming from is they're trying to capture their attention first.
Yeah.
But two things of that. Why does it have to be whitetail deer or big game in general? Why isn't there a huge push or for the state agencies to say, you know what? We're going to allow you to squirrel hunt early. That's it, right? Because I was a squirrel hunter before anything, and small game is the greatest gateway into big game hunting. It is big responsibility to be a big game hunter. There's no two ways about it. So why not? We overlook small game. Yep. We overlook fishing as a gateway drug into big game hunting.
Trapping.
Trapping.
That was mine.
Trapping's
trapping,
awesome.
And frankly, spotlighting was what really got.
There's
my
so many
in
different avenues out there, but and I think it's our society nowadays. It is a couple things. Social media, parents love to post pictures, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but we like everything quick, fast, and under one roof, right? We want to figure out whatever quickest way possible it is to be a hunter. So I think of a parent, and it takes a pretty deep checkbook too if you're going to buy a crossbow and go through all that. So you got a little bit of money, you have young kids. Oh, I want my kids to be a hunter, so let me buy all this gear. I've got $5 grand, wrapped up. I get to go before everybody else, type of deal. And bam, they, in a couple sits, they're probably going to be a hunter. You know what I mean? According to them, type of deal.
Yeah.
And my kid got a buck or got a doe, what have you? Okay. In 20 years, what's little Johnny or Susie doing? That's where the question is.
And I think that's a valid question, because I think ultimately, you hope that introducing them to a successful hunt early is what's going to hook them. That said, if it's repeated, right, and this is where we went back and forth, and I said, and it's no knock to them, like, as a parent, do what you want to raise your kid. But some of these kids killing booners at 7 years old, like, how do you continue to hunt the rest of your life? And I don't say that in a weird way. It's just, you are always setting milestones to challenge yourself, to do better, to be excited about the hunt. And if you're at 7 years old, the first couple deer you're killing are 150, 160, 170 class deer. Can you sustain that for the rest of your life? My guess is no. There's no way.
It definitely seems like it works against you, like to what you were saying earlier, like the challenge and frankly the failure. Jeremy and I have really honed in on this on some past podcasts. Is like it seems like there is a very direct, strong correlation between failure at hunting and passion for hunting in the long term. Yes. It's like I think back to, and I mentioned as a 12-year-old, surely I was missing deer, and I wasn't like success. I didn't kill a deer with my bow. From the time that I started having interest in hunting was, spotlighting with my uncle when I was, 8 years old or whatever it is, till the time I could start bow hunting at 12, to the time I actually killed a deer with my bow, I was probably like 15 or 16 years old. Yeah. So there's like an 8 or 10 year time span there of brewing obsession before I even like got a taste of a taste of the glory.
Yeah, I think things like this, like when you have kids, like it's really important to me. Looking back again, me hanging out in that archery shop, listening to the stories. Oh, yeah. I wasn't even participating, but I can still repeat to this day some of the stories those older guys told.
That was deer camp.
Yeah, it was like deer camp, right? Yeah. And there was a group of guys, the couple owners, and they went out west every year. They hunted Colorado, which was over the counter. And again, we're talking late 80s, early 90s, probably mid 80s, so not a lot of, and I would like hang on the edge of the seat. If somebody killed an elk, like just to look at the antlers of an elk, you know what I mean? Like they brought back to Pennsylvania from Colorado type of deal. I would just literally stare at it, and I mean, just that whole captivation to me was a world unknown, but it was, I guess as a child, it was the world unknown in my mind, but doable because they were doing it, you know what I mean? And then my grandpa, he lived in Florida. He retired to Florida, but he bought me one year, I'm going to say maybe when I was 10 years old, he bought me a lifetime subscription to Field and Stream. And I could not wait for that Field and Stream magazine to show up. my first, like I was fascinated by bighorn sheep. I remember like the first article, like I could read, like whatever grade I was in, 4th or 5th grade, a guy did a bighorn sheep hunt in Wyoming and he killed a bighorn sheep with a 280. That was my first rifle. I still have it to this day. Like I just, to the eye, I was like, man, a 280, what is a 280? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is a bighorn sheep, but I don't know. I was just fascinated by that. But, I didn't have somebody saying, here, I'm going to take you hunting and do everything for you and you shoot the animal. If that had happened, I honestly don't think I'd be sitting here today.
Mm-hmm. No, I wouldn't think so.
And it saved me from probably when I was in high school, I played baseball in the spring and golf and, late summer, early fall, and golf season was over, like right around bow season started. So I was a decent athlete. People wanted me to play other sports and I didn't because I went hunting.
Yeah.
I was like, nope, I'm hunting.
Yeah. Well, and I think that piece of it in terms of being able to stick to something, because there are people, it doesn't mean that you would never hunt again, but if you look at a lot of let's say your weekend warrior guys, right? Or the guys who go out opening day rifle, I don't doubt that they love to hunt. Like, I think they really enjoy it, but they go out for a handful of days and it's more of camaraderie and, just being out there because it's the opening day of hunting season. Same with trout fishing. Like, it's the opening day of trout season or whatever.
Right.
And then, they're on to plan B, C, D, E the rest of the year, right? Where there's a group of guys sitting at this table, like, I'm thinking about it now, and we're about the furthest from deer season as possible at this point.
There are guys between too, like, not that you have to be at any certain level of obsession or passion to like be in the club or whatever, wherever you're at in the journey. But I've very recently talked to some guys that are like, they're like, oh, my dad has property in in Illinois and Ohio, and we bow hunt, and it's interesting to like have those conversations because I'm constantly like, I'm in our conversation trying to get to the root of like, how much do you care about this thing, and it's interesting to perceive like, where people are at with that. And I'm constantly asking myself, like, what was it? And it sounds like you've had a similar upbringing. Like, there was things along the way and it wasn't necessarily successes. In most cases, it was failures or just like, dreaming about things that could be. It's like, what made me so obsessed with this thing? Why is this all I care about?
Yeah, it's almost to a fault some point.
Yeah,
for sure. I was diving into the numbers just one day last week, the hunting license sales and so forth, and not a statistic, but I started to think about something when you look in. Well, I'll keep it to round numbers, but let's just say we're selling 100,000 license, right? So you can say, I was looking at the state of Colorado actually because they have over the counter, elk tag, and we know a lot of people that go out.
I shot
there
an elk in Colorado last year.
Over the counter type deal, right? So
it was actually a draw, but it was like a very high odds draw.
Right. So good deal. But so if you sell 100,000 license, and that's the statistic that the state agency keeps, there's a big difference between 100,000 people who go hunting one day, or if you have 100,000 people that hunt the same. Well, dude, that's BLM 15 days in a row.
That's the crossbow thing.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's where you're going with that.
Then if there's, let's just say you sell 100,000 license and 50,000 of those people hunt 5 days a year, right? But the other 50,000 people hunt 50 days a year.
Yeah.
Does that mean you have, I can't do the quick math, but 500,000 hunters? Right. Because when you break it down like that, you know what I mean?
Exactly right.
And I think that
that's our perception in this state too. It's like, we're hearing, oh, we need more hunters. And at the same time, across the country, frankly, especially on public land, we're perceiving more hunting pressure than ever before. Yeah. So maybe it is fewer
more
hunters,
opportunities.
We're spending more time in the woods than ever before.
Well, I talked to my buddy who hunts over-the-counter Colorado archery season, and he was like, dude, we do not need more hunters. He was like, he's been hunting out there for 15 years, and he was like, I've never seen it so bad the last 5 years.
That's how Kansas was
this
year.
Have you heard anything different in any state?
No. And the scary part is this year should have been when we finally see that decrease because of the COVID people going back to normal life.
But so here's my point. I think we're going to. We are 100%. We've been still trending downward.
Oh, we're going to crash.
If you look at the 25-year progression, we're trending downward. But to my point, there's a lot of people who are hunting at the same time.
Yes.
Right. Like, elk season starts September 15th.
Yeah.
And from September 15th to September 25th,
It's hammered.
It's hammered. And then probably it drastically goes down after that, especially once the snow flies. You know what I mean? So there might only be 100,000 people hunting over-the-counter Colorado elk on September 15th. But if you have all 100,000 of them hunting in that 10-day window, it seems so busy. You know, and I mean, he told me, he was like they were camping. They do like primitive type stuff, and you know, I don't know exactly the scenario, but from the sounds of it, he's like, there's a road, they camp, you know, pretty fairly close to the road type of deal. And he said it was just truck traffic all night long. You know, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning.
Crazy.
You know? And he killed a bull, but he said, I literally left camp at 1 a.m. because he's like, I didn't know what to expect at daylight. So I just hiked and just kept going and going and going. And I'm like, I'm just going to try to outrun these people.
Yeah, outrun them.
In our camp, we were calling guys in.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And I killed a bull too. I was fortunate. I was one of 6 guys, you know, but we got after
You're
him.
you're the only one that got a bull?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You're that much better than your buddies.
Younger.
Oh, okay.
Younger. We had a couple guys in our 60s and stuff.
Oh, okay.
My dad's in his, I mean, I was training like a madman for it. And so they put me with the youngest guy, and we climbed 7,000, you know, whatever, the first day. And so we got into him.
Yeah.
But we were running.
I'm just teasing you.
I know. Yeah. We were running into guys lower end. We were calling guys in, and same deal. We were 15 miles back in. We took it was like a 8-hour horseback ride back into our camp. Mm-hmm. And still, it's like there's guys in freaking, they got their KU packs and are, you know, and it's a good thing that, like, you know, people want to go crazy for it. They want to go as deep as they can on public land, and like, it's cool. It's a good obsession, but it's like, man, how much can, you know, the public land and the resource of the wildlife sustain?
Well, so there's a bunch of statistics out there now. Like somebody shared an article with me. I think it was titled "The Elk Have Spoken" or something like that, and they don't want any more hunters.
Well, I mean, and listen, 5 years ago, if we said what we're saying now, of like, hey, we don't want any
Chick-fil-A commercial. Eat more cows.
We don't want any more hunters. We have been crucified for it.
Oh,
We're crucified
dude,
for it.
Yeah, and like, how dare you? You know,
I know.
Again, like, well, I mean, if you want to be a hunter, that's great, but we're going to great lengths to create hunters, and this is one of my big, I don't want to say issues with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We all three reside in Pennsylvania. I mean, I know Brian Burhan's the executive director, as you guys, right? Like, I'm not pointing fingers, but we are going to great lengths to create new hunters. I don't think the problem is, where are they going to hunt? There's less and less property out there. Yeah. And for some reason, and I feel like with, you know, as the state grows, that's to be expected. I mean, people get married, they build houses, they build buildings, they open businesses, they create parking lots, they open a restaurant. I mean, there's going to be less and less habitat. I don't see it becoming more. The land is deteriorating. Private property is harder to come by. I mean, you know, the average price per acre, as you guys probably know, is higher now than it's ever been. Yeah. You know, so it's not like, okay, I'm a hunter this year, next year I'm going to go buy a 100-acre farm. I mean, it very rarely works that way. Where are they going to go if we get, and what is the number? That again.
We've never even had to ask ourselves. I mean, that's the problem.
Like, there's a plan to create new hunters with the R3 program, right? We're going to create new hunters. That's the plan. But what's the end game? We peaked at 1.2 million in Pennsylvania, and we're at, you know, between 750,000 or 800,000, depending on who's doing the counting. So, is it 1.2 million? Is it 1.4 million? I mean, what's the number? How many do we need? I mean, do we need 20 million?
Well, also, what is the objective of
that's what I mean.
It's licensed dollars.
It's licensed dollars, and unfortunately, and I know this all too well for working for a nonprofit, not so much on the state agency side, but when you get to the nonprofit side that start pushing for R3, it's because corporate dollars come into play. Mm-hmm. You know, you have
because
Bass
of
Pro
numbers of hunters.
Not numbers of hunters who buy product, right? Like, I mean,
it's the market.
It's the market, right? Like, you have Bass Pro and Cabela's and people like Johnny Morris that have, you know, huge money. Hey, I'll give you $500,000 for your R3 program. Go create some new hunters. Yeah, it's a win-win, but that's new customer. If they're going to be a new hunter, they got to buy new product. Where do most people go to buy their new product? Cabela's. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, that. I mean, I understand how the game works, but from the nonprofit standpoint, again, I worked for a nonprofit for 10 years. We were a grassroots, organization who raised money to conserve or, the future of hunting, right? But also sponsor dollars come into play. A lot of those big corporations give money to keep. That's how you keep that big wheel spinning.
I think if you touch base on, like, let's say when Pennsylvania capped out at like 1.2 million, things in play is, number one, private land wasn't like private land today. No. I mean, dude, I hunted so many different pieces of private land that were just permission, handshake, friend. Like nobody looked at their private land borders like private land.
That 25 acres, 110 acres that you grew up hunting right behind your house. I had the same thing. I don't remember. I think I asked the guy, I stopped by his house and said, is it cool if I'm doing this? And then, I had a neighbor that was much older than I was. He's since passed away, actually, but he had stands. Like, he hunted this whole place. And, today, a guy like that might say, like, stay, hey,
don't even.
This is my area. I'm growing 4-year-old bucks. But he was like, hey, I've got a few stands here. You can hunt these certain spots, and like, I had 250 acres probably back then.
So
I don't even know how big
think
it was.
of all the space that hunters had then. And then on top of it, and this is where I think we're ending up in a crash here soon, is the people who are not fortunate enough to have access to private land, who are hunting public land, are likely having miserable experiences right now.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, I mean, just flat out, like, this is not. So if you're a seasoned hunter, maybe you're tolerating it or you're figuring out. But if you're a fairly new hunter and that's your first experience is to be on public land and these guys coming through, or you're walking through like Corey did, guys shining a light, cussing up a storm at you, you're like, Jesus, like, I don't want to be in these woods.
It's a lose-lose, because it's either it's that scenario where you go to public land and you have a horrible experience, or what you were describing, you go out with a highly lethal weapon and it's like a done deal already on private land.
Right.
Both of those are extreme deterrents to me being attracted to a hunting lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. Worlds of, and man, I could go a lot of different ways with this, but back to me, start what you said about growing up. And, that's where I grew up, and I still go up there to this day. And you're right. I can't hunt. I'm trying to think, maybe when I got in my high school age, let's just say like 9th and 10th grade, still before driving age, like, I hunted everywhere around my house. Yep. I had a 4-wheeler. Like, I literally remember the big milk crates that we would get in school that they delivered the milk on. I brought one of those home and cut grooves out of it for my bow and bungee corded it to the front of I had a 3-wheeler at the time. I bungee corded it to my 3-wheeler to haul my bow on. I mean, I could go everybody where I grew up knew me. Like, oh, he's going bow hunting, type of deal. Now, I mean, there's
probably don't even have permission.
I was going to say, there's one farm that the landowner that owned it then still owns it now. He's 86 years old, still in good health and everything. I mean, I know him. His name's Bob. I mean, I could go do whatever I wanted there, like I had been 40 years ago type of deal. But that is the only place. All the other ones are gone.
Locked down.
Gone. I mean, houses and, what have you. But I would never even attempt to.
Yep.
Even right behind the house I grew up, we don't own it anymore, but even that section's gone. I mean, so from that perspective has changed. And to your point about public land, there's a big misconception out there. I think people ask the wrong question. They ask the question, can you kill deer or turkey or what have you on public land? Yes, you can. Is it going to be a quality hunt? It might be, but it might not be. And that's another unmeasurable metric is the
Does seeing
quality.
3 guys per hunt, does that mean quality?
Yeah, the quality of the hunt, I think, has to come into play at some point for these new hunters, right? I understand when I go to public land that it is nothing like my highly managed farm.
You know what you're getting
into. Right? Yeah. But if you create a handful of new hunters and turn them loose on public land in Pennsylvania, opening day of gun season.
It's the instant way to turn them off.
Good luck with that, right? Like, I mean, and I get all the time, oh, you can do it on public land. But, there's deer on public land, just not hunting hard enough. Guess what? We all don't look like have 25-inch arms and, hike all over the place.
I should have picked a different shirt for today.
Sweatshirt, no.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you get these middle-aged guys. I mean, you don't have to be drink mountain ops to go deer hunting, and if you do, I mean, I just feel like, I had one guy in particular this year tell me, I saw plenty of deer on public land, and I followed it up with, I know he's on this big health kick. I was like, how many miles were you putting in? He was like, I was averaging 13 miles a day.
Yeah.
Like, seriously? Like,
well, and that even won't get you far now based on all the YouTube content. The cool thing is to go 3 or 4 miles back in there on stuff. And so you used to be able to get away from everybody. Now
you can't because there's people like him with all mountain top up chasing me down.
Let me clear this up. I train for Western hunts. It definitely,
because you can't do it if you don't train.
Well,
No,
Jeremy and I packed out a mule deer, however far it was, and I had been training, and I know how hard that was.
It's like 3.5.
I want to enjoy it as much as I can.
No,
I don't want to be heaving and puking, trying to pull out a.
I'm all for I think overall health. You're just better
I
at
know.
everything in life. You know what I mean? Like,
No doubt.
But what I'm getting at is these when you get these public.
I'm ruining it for everybody. So
these public land misconceptions. You're not going to pull into a public land every day and just have these great experiences.
Well, I mean, when we go to the Midwest, we mainly hunt public land.
Sure.
And we've had nothing but bad experiences for the last 3 years.
I mean, dude, when you think you're doing, first of all, for us here in PA, and he's talking about Kansas, and Illinois.
In Illinois,
we drove.
We hunt our balls off too.
Hunt our balls
we
off.
hunt hard,
and we're
dude.
as mobile as you can get. I mean, we've got some of the best gear. We were light. We can go in there. It doesn't seem like it matters. Like even after, like to Illinois, it was like 11 hours. To Kansas, whatever it was. To Kansas, it's 16 hours. You're thinking you're planning this trip for a year in some cases. Maybe you make it out once or twice to shed hunt or to hang trail cameras. So you've got a lot of time, money, and effort invested in this thing already. And then to get there and every day go back in miles and put in this work, it's just like to be successful. Sure, there might be like as good as it gets, but like the chances of it are just what happens more and more is you put in all that work and 2 or 3 groups of guys walk under you, despite all the effort that you put in.
It's busted,
and it's like, why was I so excited about that? Like this is terrible.
This past weekend was the Pittsburgh sports show type of deal, the USA International, and I had a booth there, and this conversation came up a lot. I was with Barry Wenzel, who resides in Iowa, and I started hunting Iowa in, I think it was 98, 99 was like the first year I drew a tag. And back then, like you had a decent shot with no points. You had 50-50 to 65%, depending on how many people put in with 1 point.
Wow.
And you were guaranteed with 2. You went into the draw then with 2 points, you were getting a tag. I mean, that's just how it was. Most of the time, they didn't even sell out. Like, if you didn't have any points, there might be a year they had, like, an influx of people, and, you didn't draw. You know? So I hunted it a lot. The last tag I drew was in 2015. Now, back then, I literally hunted with knocking on doors and a friend of a friend type of deal. Can I bow hunt? Absolutely, no problem. When I went in 2015, I hunted strictly public land. I had zero access to private and tried. And again, hunted our balls off. I mean, I hunted 3 days and didn't see a deer. It was just, and guess what? I have 4 points this year, and I'm not sure I'm even going to put in. We're
getting our 4th point this year as well.
You know what I mean? I don't even know if I'm going to apply for a tag because I didn't have a great experience, and I hunted 8 days on public land last time I drew Iowa. So I don't know. It's just it's changing. Times have changed. But I was on this conversation. I ran into another guy that had a booth down there who had been hunting Iowa and killed a lot of giant bucks there, and he said the same thing. He was like, "I'm just out of spots. I don't have any." He has one farm. He can hunt. It's like 60
And I mean,
acres,
that's the one state that's protected, right? Every other state that we're talking about, including Kansas, is vulnerable to every other year hunting or every year hunting.
Yeah.
Iowa is the one that's like secluded to not have that influx of non-residents and just protected. Now they have some liberal buck structures in Iowa for landowners especially, but it's the one state that remains protected. So if that starts to go away,
right,
what the hell do the rest of the states look like?
Well, there's an article just put out, so they just it's going to legislator. They're trying to up the non-resident quota by 25%.
Yeah, and residents were losing their minds.
Rightfully so. I mean, like, I get it. You know what I mean? It is Iowa because of that. And honestly, I mean, I think Iowa's on a 10-year decline when you look at the deer numbers. I don't know the exact statistics, but I do know that Iowa, along with all the other Midwestern states, they're losing deer numbers. They're not exactly sure why. There's a lot of, it's like the perfect storm, from EHD. It had been hit a couple good years, maybe a little bit of CWD scattered throughout here and there. High hunter numbers now, where it hasn't been, probably more development, et cetera,
and the question comes up even for a resident is how long can they continue to have 2 bucks or 3 if you're a landowner?
Yeah, I mean
that's substantial.
Right. I mean, and I was thinking about this conversation I had with this gentleman this past weekend. We had an in-depth conversation about Iowa, and I was thinking about just that landowner tags and how many bucks, and like, I mean, nothing against some of the quote unquote, the what would you call them, the celebrity hunters that live out there, but a lot of them own a huge substantial amount of ground, and I'm wondering if that has to come into play. That's just unhuntable property. They're not letting anybody hunt there.
And they only have a certain amount of tags that are falling.
Right, exactly. So, if you've got somebody that let's just say you have 10 different people that own, I know one guy in general, or in particular, owns 8,300 acres, but let's just say you have 10 people that own 2,000 acres apiece. I mean, that's 20,000 acres right there that's tied up. That's not, I mean, that can hold a lot of deer, and they're managing for deer.
Yeah.
They're going to create the best habitat probably in the country for those deer.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of deer to be hunted, but they're just unhuntable deer.
Yeah, most of those people aren't shooting $3 a season. If they are, it's management deer.
Yeah, management type deer. Yeah, and there's not very many that are doing that, honestly. I mean, they're probably shooting enough does type of deal that they don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite the conundrum. I see you laughing. What are you laughing at?
I was just crazy is to realize how small, first of all, the world, but how small Iowa is. Like, if you look at it on a map, especially
It's a postage stamp.
I know. Well, even hone it in. Go South Central Iowa, know, and then like walk around walk around ATA, and like most of the people there, it's like if you could put their land on a map, you're like, oh, there it all, there it all is. It's kind of
and I mean it's not.
we just met the other one, Bill's neighbor the other day. Like I was just like, what are the chances of? He's like, oh yeah, no, we're here, they're here, and then you start to realize, like you're saying, there's 20,000 acres. Like these 5 guys, make it up.
Some of the farms that I hunted, I was talking about back in the late '90s, are owned by a big industry couple. I mean,
Well, and I mean, that's where, and I don't blame them, obviously, coming up to their defense on that increase in non-resident tags. The hard part there is that, like, they're the one state that they don't want to leave to go hunt anywhere else, right?
Why would you? And we can't complain.
If I lived in Iowa, I'd be just like the guy in Ohio. Hey, if you don't like it, don't come to my state.
God, I don't give a shit. Yeah, but I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is it's like, like I've talked to several of the guys, and they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. And I was like, you can come hunt in Ohio, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, where else are you gonna go? Like, you're in Iowa. Yeah. Like, why would you leave? You got 3 buck tags. Why would you leave?
Right.
Yeah. It is fun because we talked to quite a few guys from Iowa, and they're awesome people. All of them. Yeah. But they don't get it.
Oh, dude.
Like to try to explain the struggle of like even great states like Ohio and
Kansas,
we're
Illinois.
fortunate to go to some awesome states as well, but like they don't get it. Like
no,
like my family owns a big farm in Ohio. Oh, not too far from here, about 1,000. No,
thanks.
Big
turkeys. Go for it.
Big farm, and we were explaining it was Warren Holder, and so those guys own whatever, a couple hundred acres at least in Iowa.
Yeah, at least probably 1,000 more.
Yeah, and was explaining to him, he's asking about our herd demographic. He's like, so like, how many booners do you guys have on 1,000 acres? Well, I'm just like, nothing. Like
one.
Dude, every if we have a 5-year-old. That comes on the or 2 5-year-olds, we're good. We're doing really good. And he's like, that's crazy. He's like, dude, out here, he's like, if you don't have a booner for, what did he say? Every 300 acres?
I think that's what he said.
Something like it.
Yeah.
He's like,
200 acres?
You should have a booner per 150, 200 acres.
See, and I don't know if I buy that. Maybe in certain areas. Certain parts. But I that's one of the questions I ask all the time when I'm hunting. Like how many booners are within 5 miles of me right now? Like, do I even have a chance? So
and it's not a genetic thing either. Right. It's a hunter pressure. It's an age thing. Because I see how many deer on our farm should be Boone and Crockett animals, and they die at 2 and 3.
And then I go back and forth. Is that part of the problem when the general hunting public? Let's just say the guys that are spending more than 20 days of field a year, right? Then they're starting to talk like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where can I go to shoot a booner? Where can I go? And then I know some of the statistics. It's like it's less than 10% of the hunters ever in existence will kill a buck that scores over 125 with a bow, right? Less than 10%.
Wow.
So, but it's common.
Say that again.
So less than 10% of all bow hunters. This is Pope and Young statistic.
Including crossbow hunters?
If they're considered a bow hunter, yeah.
Okay.
Less than 10%.
Probably not, because they're not in Pope and Young, right?
Oh, well, they do. They have the asterisk, so yeah, they are.
They do.
Yeah, and this data may be before. Yeah, but I have to go back. But
yeah,
the general consensus is of all bow hunters,
less than 10% of all bow hunters
will shoot a buck that meets 125 minimum,
wow.
right? So and you hear these conversations of 150, 160. I mean, it's just
Sure.
You go to a
Most
holiday
people
party
are full
at work.
of shit, though.
Well, they are, but
They don't know what they're looking at.
they may not have ever killed one, but they all want to kill
Yeah,
one. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like they might not ever. Statistically, they're not going to kill one.
Right.
You know what I mean? And honestly, I mean, how many of you killed?
Not
I mean,
many.
Right. How
Not
many of you
many.
killed? I mean, we've all killed them, but it's
Yeah.
not like we got a stringer full of them.
No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 125-inch deer. What I'm getting at is a big deer, and they're
Yep.
It's a low statistical thing, but the conception when you have these types of discussions, everybody wants that, and that is driving the private land, that is driving leases, that is driving all that, because
Things that produce big deer.
They want things to produce big deer because it's really cool to talk about and have one. You know, I had a guy, I don't know how old he was, but we were talking about, we spoke in hunting mature whitetail deer, and he kind of cornered me after the seminar, and he had been hunting, adult onset hunter, had been hunting for 8 years, right? Super cool dude. And just, he was like, man, I don't want to bother you, but man, you were saying some really cool stuff. Can I ask you some questions? Absolutely. And he hadn't shot a deer with a bow. And last year, this is in Pennsylvania, he passed, like he said, it was like maybe 120, 123, 125, 9 point. You know, he was like, I just couldn't bring myself to shoot it, because I'm thinking, like, it was early November, and so there was more time. He was like, you know, if I burn my tag on that, what's coming behind him type of deal, right? And I get it. And I remember his girlfriend was with him. I was like, listen, man, I'm not telling you what to do, and I'm not ever. But there's something to be said about shooting those younger deer and just the general sense of satisfaction.
Especially like
you're
where
now a
he's at.
bow hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, I mean, dude, relish in that moment. That's what it's all about. Sit back, look at those antlers on the wall or what have you, and just,
Well,
that's what you're
but he's
doing
watching
this for.
social media,
So-
and so he thinks like I shouldn't shoot that. I gotta hold out. This is what I'm supposed to do. Da,
Well,
da,
I mean,
da, da, da.
I had some pictures behind me, and there he was like, "Oh, I want a buck like that." It was 193. I'm like, "Yeah, no, I would,
Yeah,
right."
we all
But,
do.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to kill a 193. I mean, statistically, I mean, you might, but you might get struck by lightning too. You
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Yeah,
but
very true.
my point, and I hope all bow hunters, man, like, I wonder if this whole craze, this big antler thing, it's taking what it actually means to be a bow hunter. It's taking that out of it. I really do believe that. I told my buddy one time, and I think I told you this, I started hunting, as we established, at a very young age, and I honestly had more fun then than I have now. I do it now because
Agree.
it is in my blood. But I was in Ohio this one particular time in a tree stand that I had to get to on a wrong wind. The wind was out of the south or southwest. I parked at the southwest corner, so the wind's blowing into the timber I'm going to hunt. But it's November. I know exactly what day. It was November 15th, so I had to be there, right? Everything that the pressure was low. It was freezing rain. It was just a nasty, shitty day. The wind was almost wrong for this only stand I could hunt type of deal, and I had to be there. Like you're not going to kill him if you're not there. And I had a buddy who was hunting pretty close to me, and I remember texting him, and I said, I have less than a 5% chance of a buck that I want to shoot to walk by me today. And I said something to the effect of, hunting was a lot more fun when I didn't understand what was actually going on. You know what I mean? And I mean, I go back and forth with that now to this day, probably even more so now because I have young kids. I'm like, I need to get back to the fun side of it, And I think you had mentioned something earlier about kids, and we have kids. I can tell you, my oldest son, I have a big gap. I have a 15-year-old and I have 6-year-old twins. So there's quite the gap between the two of them. When my 15-year-old started to hunt, his first deer, the first deer he ever killed, this was with a gun, he was 10 years old, and it was a 130-inch 8-point, legit 130-inch 8-point out of a shooting house on a food plot, right? Because that's what I had. I could do that, I mean, he was excited to shoot that deer. Guess how many deer he's killed since then? 0. Like, guess how many times he hunted this season with me? 0. Now, he's in high school sports and everything like that, and he's 15. I leave it up to him, right? I don't force him to go hunting. He doesn't like to get up early. He likes to bow hunt, and he plays fall soccer, and he swims, so that does take up a lot of his time. But it's not like it was when I was 15.
Sure.
It's not like the world stops, and then I go hunting and figure the rest out, right? He could take it or leave it. And again, back to that apprenticeship, that he didn't earn his buck, man. That whole earn a buck, there's that key phrase. There's something to that.
Yeah.
And I have a slew of deer on the wall. Here's another thing. I test them all the time. He knows now because I've done it, but the first 6 times I said, show me the buck you shot. He can't show you. He doesn't know which one it is. I mean, the first buck I shot, I can still show you. You know what I mean? Like,
me too.
And when I shot it then, like I knew every little bump on that deer's pedicle. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, I was very intimate with those antlers.
Yeah.
And he's just like, was it that one? You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm going to do things different with the 6-year-olds. You know, they're going to come up a different way. It's going to be way different because I want them to have those same life experiences that I got out of hunting.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the funny thing is because we get so consumed with it, to your point, the amount of knowledge we have about it does make it less fun. I mean, we talked about it. Like growing up, my one tree stand I bow hunted out of was made out of 2x4s. Yeah, it didn't matter if it was north, south, west, east. I didn't care. I sat in that damn stand. It was the only stand I had. Right, so out of 2x4 and play the wind. Yeah, my dad was smoking cigarettes across the field from me. You know, but I mean, that's just how we hunted. And there were times stupid luck and a deer comes by, you know. The Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews. Yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX-5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX-7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and, killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt.
This season has really been an eye opener for me. You know, again, I'm almost 46 years old. I've been hunting, big mature deer for a long time, and it dawned on me this year that I spend a lot of time hunting one buck that I don't even know if I'm going to get or not. I didn't kill a buck this year, and I didn't kill a buck last year. Now, could I have killed a buck? Lots of bucks, right? But I like to shoot them when they're 5 years old or older. So I didn't shoot a buck in 2 years right, in Pennsylvania. I don't know how many hours I spend hunting. I mean, countless hours. If you look at, I can tell you this, I've been working on TSI, and I kept tracking the month of January. I have 42 hours of timber stand improvement just in the month of January for next year. You know what I mean? So, and TSI will turn into spring food plots, will turn into, summertime will turn into, I mean, it's an ever-evolving door. So
the credit card statement situation is the same in a lot of cases.
Exactly, right? And I have two of my best friends in life. One lives in Montana, Missoula, Montana, and the other lives in Boise, Idaho. And, they start hunting elk in September. They hunt mule deer. They hunt elk with a bow. That rolls into mule deer, and whitetail with a bow. That rolls into elk with a gun. That rolls into, they always have spring bear or fall bear tags, and that rolls into antler. Everything they hunt, they might hunt, whatever, 5, 6, 7 different species from September to Thanksgiving when we're just kind of getting rolling. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they've killed 5 or 6 animals, and they'll hunt a couple states too because they live in the West, I have an open invitation out there, and it dawned on me this year. I'm like, how much time am I spent, and what am I missing? What else is there? I've hunted ducks in Louisiana, which somebody asked me yesterday or day before yesterday to show where would I live, if I didn't, and what would I hunt and I honestly, southern Louisiana is awesome. I've redfished down there. I've duck hunted down there. There's deer. I never thought in a million years I'd like that area, but once I've done it a few times, I'm like, holy cow, this place is super cool. Yeah. People are great. The Cajuns, they speak their own language, but whatever. But my point is, I spend a lot of time on the same 300 acres to hope to kill one deer every other year or every 2 years. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, and I'm learning a lot, and my kids are involved. So but what else could I be doing?
What else could you do?
You know what I mean? There's spring bears, there's fall bears, there's antelope. I've done all that, but I've done it once. I'm like, I'll go back home and hunt whitetails now. I don't know if my heart is.
I mean, we did the same thing. Like, we
Right.
get all
Well,
ramped up.
how do you feel about it after all that? Is it,
Dude,
is it like, hey, there's nothing like whitetails?
like there's I mean
Let me
there'll always be a place in my here's what I think there'll always be a place in my heart, but I think, just as I mentioned earlier, whitetails are so close to me because they're in my backyard,
Yeah.
just like everybody else. So that's if it costs money to do all that other stuff, you know
and
what I mean,
time and travel.
I'm spending the time, you know, so it's a wash there, but the money and travel has to come in play at some point, you know, when you have you know, a wife and 3 kids type of deal. But the experience, I think I'm missing out on.
Sure.
Man.
Our thought process is very similar, but maybe a little more tailored to whitetails at the moment. You know what I mean? So we are like, well, we could be hunting whitetails in Kansas. We could be hunting whitetails in Illinois. We could be hunting whitetails but we've also, you know, for the sense of September is like wide open. You know what I mean? Ohio doesn't open until the 28th. PA doesn't open until the following week.
Yeah, Kentucky's only opener.
Yeah, you have Kentucky now, but so we infused mule deer 2 years ago, and it was like awesome,
Perfect.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest with myself, it's not the same as like the same. I try to like weigh the experience. I'm like, did I
Completely different.
Although I will say, that's one of the most fun hunts I've ever had.
It's just good spot and stock. I mean, it feels good. Nothing wrong with whitetail in bow season, but it feels good to just get out and go.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
you
mule
could
deer
just
hunt is one of the
go.
most fun hunts I've ever had. Jeremy and I just went. We
go.
drove 25 hours across the country. We rented a camper out there, and then we just like bumbled out onto public land and ended up shooting 2 and 3-year-old bucks. And like, you know, we had
I would be all for that.
had somewhat of a goal for the first year.
And that's how I used to hunt in PA. You just went. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I was attracted me the most.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I will
Hard
say
now.
though, I went and hunted elk this past year, and like there was plenty of things that were different about it. It was Colorado. It was with an outfitter, you know, semi, like they were friends of ours and stuff. It wasn't like they put you in a lodge. I mean, it was a hard hunt,
Right.
and I killed an elk. I killed 5x5 with my bow, and it was awesome. Don't get me wrong. But then, so after the hunt, I just sat down and was like, how did I feel about that while that was happening, you know? And if I'm being honest, like, dude, it ain't deer hunting for me.
It ain't deer.
For me. And I know guys that most of them are turkey hunters. The turkey hunters seem to like them.
You're not a turkey hunter?
I've killed turkeys.
Right. But it's not like.
It's too easy. No, I just, you know, I prefer deer hunting. Honestly, I prefer mule deer over elk. I think I just do something about deer and something about them not knowing you're there. Granted, you could say, yeah, you rattle them, man, or you grunt, but like the spot and stock element for mule deer and just the silence of killing one on a pattern on a whitetail hunt, for me, every time trumps even a big bugle and elk, you know?
Yeah.
And certainly a turkey.
There's a book out there I read one time, and it said, you know, like the 3 style of hunting when you look at the wild animals. So there's like, you think of a
Adventure is
mountain
the one I'm leaving out, like the brown bear off the ground.
Yeah, that's super cool. But I'm talking like the mountain lion cougar type predator that sneaks around. So that would be akin to your mule deer hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a pack of wolves, right? So those are like your hound hunters, or a lot of the eastern hunters when they're doing drives, they're, you know, bumping deer.
Yeah.
You know, they're not. And then there's the falconry type hunters that perch up in a tree and wait for their prey to come by undetected. And when I read that, and then I correlated it to how I like to hunt, and I wrote it on a book, and like, first, I like to be perched in a tree and be the unannounced predator.
Yeah.
Just boom, here I am.
Which
you know,
I
real
love.
quiet.
Like,
That's
you
super
got in
cool.
his bedroom, he didn't know you were there, type of thing. I mean, that's on a mature buck. That's something to write home about, man.
There is something, to your point, there's something about outsmarting a mature deer and doing all the TSI like I'm doing now, and knowing why they're walking, where they're walking, knowing where they're coming from, knowing where they're heading, and then shooting at 15 yards like the boogeyman. Like, you'll never replace that. You know
Arguably,
what I mean?
it's the most like intelligent of the 3 approaches. It requires the most observation, you know what I mean, to find a weak spot. And yeah, there's luck involved for sure. But
I think my number 2 in that category was the predator style, you know, with the cat sneaking around like a mule deer, because you still have to, that cat and mouse or chess game still has to come into play, especially I would only assume spot and stock and mule deer. I mean, you're paying attention to wind, you're paying attention to rising and falling thermals, you're paying attention
where's
to
the
terrain.
sun hitting, where's the shadows early because it's 95 degrees.
Yeah, there's a lot of that comes into play. So you're outsmarting them, you know. I mean, you know, least is that wolf pack mentality. I don't really get into that. Although I did run hounds this year with a friend of mine. We ran some coyote dogs, and then I had a bobcat tag, so we were trying to tree a bobcat in Pennsylvania. And watching those hounds, that was pretty cool too. I could get into that.
Yeah.
I saw a bobcat hit in McMurray yesterday.
Oh yeah.
You didn't pick it up?
On the side of the road? No, we were on our way to church, and I was driving past. it was small. I caught it out of the
There's
corner.
a
of my
lot.
eye.
I mean, not a lot, but way more than there used to be.
I think when I was young too, had I been forced to sit in a tree stand like I do now, I wouldn't have been anxious to go hunting. We grew up, we hunted the first day in gun season.
Oh yeah.
You know, but after that we drove type of deal. But it was the social aspect. I love 25 guys together, you know, cutting it up, having a good time. You know, who knows what you were going to hear when you were a little 12-year-old, you know, walking around with a bunch
that
of
was it,
adults,
man.
you know
I
what I
mean,
mean? Like, that was just cool. But yeah, if
I knew every backside of every mountain though at that point.
right, and if one of those older guys would have taken me and said, we're going to get up at 4:30 in the morning, you're going to walk 3 miles and get in this tree stand and stay there until at least like 1 o'clock, and then we're going to go somewhere else. Like, I don't, like, no way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's kind of what I did to my oldest son. You know, I forced him. This is how we hunt big deer. You know what I mean? That's what you got to do. And he was like, "This sucks." He calls it deer waiting. I still call it. He's like, I remember one time he came out of the woods, he and I together, and when he was like 14, I let him hunt in his own stand where I could see him, and he texted me and was like, "Deer waiting's boring," and I was like, I remember reading it like, deer waiting. That's what we're doing here.
It's interesting because I did a lot of that too. A lot of long sits, and they sucked. But like I don't know. For some reason I've just endured it. I've just
That's a mindset. I mean, you know, who
I'm
knows
impatient.
what did you say?
I'm impatient.
Yeah, I am too.
You are.
Yeah. I don't ever sit. Like in Kansas, he's got his lunch.
I'll
in.
sit, dude. I'll
By
sit
10
all
o'clock,
day.
I'm like, all right, that's about it for
No,
today.
I'll sit all day anymore. But when I was younger, I was impatient.
Yeah, I'm still impatient.
But
I
I won't sit just to sit. Like I gotta feel like there's a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta be confident that like I'm in the spot or.
I think part of that comes back to like I've never killed a deer between 10 and 2.
Oh, that's probably when I kill most of my deer, between 10 and 2.
So I've never killed. But I'm a late October guy. I'd hunt late October over November any day of the week.
I will say, as much as I'm all for an all-day sit, man, can you get a lot of information from the truck?
Sure.
Like, and that's hard to beat too. So I mean,
when we're out there at least.
yeah, maybe it's not even like midday or whenever. If I can get the best of both worlds, like I'll be in the truck as much as I can, just taking it all in. But I'm all for the all-day sits if.
Yeah, I like
can.
back here. I sit like given the time of year, like Jeremy just said, end of October through November, and if I know they're good deer in the area, like I have no problem sitting all day. Like it doesn't. It's down to a science.
It's
how I
harder
keep
for me
warm.
to do back home.
Really?
I think it's more when we go out of state. It's wanting to make the most of the 7 days we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I'm back home, I'm like, am I really gonna sit all day? Like I got the whole season here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I got this last week's seminar was, do you go in before daylight, you know, or after light? And I'm an after light guy because
Really?
yeah, I go in, like I call it pink light, but like I want to see where I'm going, because if I'm going to bump a deer, I'd rather hope that I can see it first and not bump it. Yeah, I've done that plenty of times. But when I, go in like a bulldozer a half hour before daylight or whatever, I know I jump deer and don't see them. I've smelled them before in the rut, you know what I mean, close to your stand. So you bump those deer. And there have been plenty of times in the daylight where I have saw deer and I didn't want to bump them, that it changed my hunt. I didn't maybe go to that stand, or I waited until they moved on, But as I told the person, I can count on one hand how many deer I shot. Let's just say it gets daylight, that time of year, 10 to 7. From 10 to 7 to 7:30, I don't know if I've ever shot a deer, that in that 40 minutes. So am I really missing anything? And most of them, when you said you've not killed one between 10 and 2, most of them are 10:20, 10:30, 11 o'clock, that type of deal. So I could have got there at 9.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, because I mean, most of the deer I've killed are evening deer, I would assume, because it's usually that late October time period.
Me too.
Although
for
that
sure.
one, I killed that one this year in the evening as well.
I think I've only killed one in the morning.
I've killed a few.
So I've killed a lot in the morning only
Two.
because
Killed 2 in the morning.
with my work schedule, when I was, shooting, I hunted mornings.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a person tell me that one time. He was like, I've never killed very few deer in the morning. He's like, I shoot all my deer in the evening. And I said, well, when do you hunt? And he was like,
Evening.
Well, after work in the evenings.
Yeah.
I think I see a pattern. I think I see a pattern here.
That's like them guys that are like, I only shoot deer when I have the ozonics in the tree. I'm like, do you ever hunt without the ozonics in the tree? They're like, no.
Same with the red moon guys.
Oh, the red moon. That's what I'm thinking.
I only kill deer on red moon. I'm like, well, when do you hunt? During the red moon.
Only on the red moon.
Yeah.
I see a pattern there.
It's funny how we don't pay attention to that. We'll pay attention to every other detail as deer hunters.
I see a pattern there. Yeah, that's funny. No, I mean, I think when you start to look at it that way. Well, I guess before I do, I was gonna ask, what's the biggest deer you've ever seen in the woods?
Saw?
Mm-hmm.
Like antler wise, score wise? I can tell you, and you're gonna laugh, where it was well over 200 inches, but it was in Texas.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you count that in the woods? But
yeah,
it was South Texas.
South Texas.
But I saw, a legit, 215, 220. And when you see one of those, you're like, whoa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen one.
Yeah.
In Ohio. Yeah. It's those are the deer that those deer still keep me up at night.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to see those type of deer. And I was on a call hunt, so it was even
I mean, that seems borderline, right?
It's even worse whenever.
Yeah. He ain't going to get any better. I think that.
Yeah, right.
About to call his ass right out of this place.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I say that because and obviously, because I saw that 200, but was that 2 years ago in Ohio?
I think so.
Yeah, that's when you killed your bin. So 2 years ago in Ohio. But when I was growing up, I mean, here in Pennsylvania especially, I mean, you saw like 120-inch deer and you're like, holy shit, like that's a big buck type of thing.
And I tell people, especially in PA hunters, like a 140 in PA.
That's stud.
Dude, you're like,
That's
you
stud.
know it when I wouldn't say a 140. You know when you see a 4 or 5 year old deer in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Like, I don't care what he has on his head. When you see a 5-year-old deer, it's just like, whoa, that's a big mature deer.
Yeah, that's a
You
stud.
know what I mean? Like, it is way different. And I had a buddy of mine in a shooting house with me on a food plot. Again, highly managed stuff, Pennsylvania, and he had never probably saw a buck, over 3-year-old, I would say. And there were some bucks on the field, and one of them was a 3-year-old pushing some does around, and I'm just wait. And I knew there was a big buck in the area, and sure enough, he stepped out right at dark. And I mean, his exact words were like, "Whoa!" Like, I never saw a buck that big. Like, he wasn't talking antler wise because it wasn't a huge set of antlers.
just
To your
body.
comment earlier about less than 10%, we'll shoot a deer over 125 inches. Most people have never seen a 4-year-old buck.
Right.
Yeah,
I
for
especially in Pennsylvania.
And it is crazy because it's, we ask ourselves, it's like, how did somebody, how could you mistake that? When somebody shoots a 2 or 3-year-old buck, but then you try to understand, they've never seen a 4 or even a 5-year-old buck. It's like, dude, it's such a rare experience, like to see something like that. And it's like,
well, I think it's because like we see, again, not to keep beat the dead horse, but you live on social media or whatever, you see the amount of 4 and 5-year-old bucks, and it's like, man, like there's just a lot of them out there. There isn't.
There's a lot of them on social media, but even then, it's not a lot. Like, are you adding them up? You know what I mean? Like at the end, like
you're just
you
going
see 100
through
of
and
them.
you're
It
like,
looks like a lot,
Yeah, you're like, what the hell? Like, man,
those catching deer guys did a commercial one time, like booner, booner. You're like, yeah, you see it, but
but it's not. That's not reality.
It isn't. I mean, even for me, like I said, I haven't killed a deer in 2 years. Right? And like my son, my youngest, my 6-year-old, he told me this year because my buddy killed a nice buck and we went over to look at it. And when we left there, my 6-year-old was like, "You're just not that good of a bow hunter, Daddy." Like,
well,
he's like, I want him to be my dad.
Listen, I mean, there are people, because that's a tough thing to do as a guy, like you said. If you think about the amount of hours you put in the season to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, you're okay eating a tag.
It doesn't matter to me at all. Yeah.
There are a lot of people who cannot.
Yeah.
They will not. They cannot. They say they will.
Oh, yeah.
They say they'll hold out. But when it comes down to it, that tag is getting filled. It does. If it's and they're the same people, no knock to them, they'll say, yeah, not my biggest, but
yeah,
XXXXX, whatever after that.
It drives me nuts. And they say they're not, and then it's like not dead for 30 seconds, and it's on Facebook.
If you want to kill a mature buck,
like,
you've got to be willing to eat your tag.
You have to be, because they're just not. It's hard to do. I mean, and then we're hunting in PA. I mean, there's 800,000 other hunters out there trying to do it. You know what I mean? Like, statistically, they don't get that old.
I mean, I hit a stretch. 2016, I killed a 4-year-old on Foster's property. 2017, I killed that one. 2018, I killed that one, and then I haven't killed one since in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Because I killed a 4, 5, and 7-year-old buck with my bow 3 years in a row, and then it was like, shit. Yeah. And I chased a couple giants, but I also didn't hunt some mature bucks because...
Yeah. I mean, it honestly, it means it doesn't, if I go another 5 years, it doesn't matter to me. I am so past, like, I have to have, don't get me wrong, I'm a hunter and I want to kill animals, and I do, you know what I mean? I think I shot 2 does this year with my bow, and I shot one in the late season. You know, I have DMAP tags for the farm, so I killed 2 of the bow and one with my flintlock muzzleloader. That's fun, right?
Yeah.
Plus we eat a lot of deer meat, so I eat it, but it doesn't matter to me at all. I'm more into that whole romance of everything that goes along with hunting big mature deer. You know, like I video just about every deer, if I can, that comes underneath of me. If I, when like my MO, when I see a deer coming towards me, like I instantly glance at it and see if I need to grab my bow. I'd probably not pick my bow up off the hanger in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then I grab a camera and video it. You know
I had
what I mean?
almost a mistake this past season, and it was a lot of our conversation. I can kind of relate to with. Initially, I was trying to hunt a specific buck. My dad ended up killing it. It was a 162.5-inch 8-point, clean,
Wow.
giant.
Yeah, clean.
23 inside. I was chasing pictures here in a minute.
Pennsylvania?
Ohio.
About 2 hours west of here.
That place I'm not allowed to hunt.
Right.
Yes. That's why.
That's the one. And so initially, I was holding out for that deer, and he ended up disappearing like mid-October. And not that because I'm on board with, like, I wasn't going to shoot anything less than a mature buck either, which for me is like, I'm on the line of, like, it's 4 has been mature for me, but they're kind of the new 3-year-olds for me, so I'm trying to shoot a 5-year-old buck, and that deer disappeared. And if you remember that first week of November, we got that hot spell.
Yeah.
And I was just like, the next week we were leaving for Kansas. And so I kind of have this time frame here of, like, man, yes, there's time when we get back, but, like, my time is dwindling to try to kill that buck or a mature buck in Ohio, but before we leave for that and stuff. And so, I started, like, feeling that pressure, and I got in a wreck. Remember before we were talking, I wrecked my car. Right. That was November 2nd. I was going up for, like, the last cold, crisp morning we were going to have kind of before we left for Kansas. Crushed this deer on the way up, $17,000 worth of damage on my truck. Spent the next morning dealing with rental car and, insurance and stuff. So obviously didn't get to hunt. Morning comes and passes. Got some, what did I have? Chipotle in my belly, mid-afternoon.
Chipotle in the belly.
Yeah, got some SD cards. I started feeling,
You're coming around.
I was coming around, and so that evening I was like, man, with all this stuff going wrong, I was like, I gotta get in a tree.
Right.
I'd killed my first booner out of the same tree the year before, and I was like, that's when I got the wind's right for it. That's where I'm going. Got to the spot. It was like 70 something degrees. Didn't change. First time in my life I've never changed into my hunting stuff. I just went in my t-shirt.
Right.
I put my boots on, put my harness on, went to the stand.
I can't believe you can hunt that way.
Yeah. Apparently you can.
Apparently you can.
Apparently,
Like, literally, I was just wearing a t-shirt, and wouldn't you know it, like 5:30, I see his doe coming down, and I hear a buck grunting behind her, and on his property there's a 9-point that I'm hunting there on permission on a good friend, and we'd agreed not to shoot this 4-year-old 9-point. This is our transition of, like, okay, we're trying to get these deer through.
One more year, right?
And so this doe walks right down this trail, right out into the clover food plot in front of me. And here comes this buck. And I'm like, oh, that's that 9-point. Like, sweet. He's going to walk out 10 yards in front of me. So I put, this is back to our filming everything that comes beneath us. I pull my phone out and I start filming him. And I filmed him for, like, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds. He's just ripping a scrape back in the woods here. And then he starts coming down the trail. And he's maybe, he's 15, 20 yards from me before I realized that's not that 9-point. in the back of my mind, I had cataloged, there's this one other deer I had literally one picture of that when I saw the picture, apparently I had decided, I don't know what that is, but that's a shooter. That's who I'm like, that's who that is. So I stuffed my phone in my pocket, you know, deer's 10 yards in front of me before I even get my bow off the thing. And I drew back and I shot him. And then, you know, everything kind of unfolded after that. I hit him back. And so I start like worst case scenario. I'm like, that's the 9 point probably. Like I shouldn't have shot the deer and I made a bad shot on it. And so, you know, push comes to shove. At the end of the day, I did get the deer. It was the deer I thought it was and not the 9 point. But I almost missed that opportunity because I was filming him. I have the footage where I'm like, I realized it was him and then I stuff it in my pocket.
Yeah.
And then scramble to get the bow and shoot him, you know?
You can look at it as you almost missed it, but it also might have made you where you got it too, because, and I say
had
this
I
a
not
lot,
been filming that deer and known that I was going to shoot the deer earlier, I would have not made a bad shot.
But you might
I'm
not
pretty
even
confident.
have got a shot, right? Because who knows? You can never say for sure. That's what I
Sure.
tell people, because who knows? Maybe when you saw him and I'm like, okay, I'm going to kill that deer. As soon as you see him, he catches you moving, getting your bow off the stand. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I never say for
Maybe.
sure. You know what I
Maybe.
mean? Like that phone might have allowed that deer to get to 10
Maybe.
yards. Yeah,
Sure.
you made a bad shot, but you killed it.
Maybe.
Where he might have winded you or saw you or caught a glimpse or what have you. You know, people tell me, they show me, I get a lot of trail camera pictures sent to me, you know, just randomly.
Mm-hmm.
And this big buck was in, you know, this scrape with this camera on it. My tree stand's 15 yards away had I only been there. And I always say, had you been there, that deer might not even show up. You know what I mean? Because it might have smelled you 250 yards away. You didn't know about
Well,
it.
we talk about that all the time. I mean, the amount of deer that you don't see that were there and caught your thermal or wind or whatever, you know, is astronomical. I had one sneak up behind me in Ohio, and he was in a food plot. Had he not been, I probably wouldn't have seen how he reacted, which was he tucked his nose down just enough to catch my wind and just did a 360 and just right out the other way. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
Dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, there's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com, check them out.
I
That's from Kansas.
buried a ram cat in that deer's shoulder.
Oh.
Yeah.
Those are all Kansas antlers.
Yeah, but I think on that standpoint though, and we understand that because it's dollars, it's license sales. Do those states realize that we're about to walk off a cliff? Like at some point,
There's no coming back either.
we're gonna walk off a cliff because they've made it so easy. They've put more people out there. The public land experience is miserable. The private land experience, nobody can afford $50 to $60 an acre leases. They can't afford to buy land. So all of these things are coming into play that they're recruiting new people, but it's a very unpleasing experience to come into the hunting world as a new hunter right now.
Yeah.
And so at some point, it's going to be like, oh, look at all these hunters, we're building, and then it's just going to go boom, right off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen?
Right.
Are the hunters who are left going to have to try to carry that bucket of water back? I mean,
Well, and unfortunately, a portion of them are going to be passionate hunters who it's just the experience just been ruined for them.
For sure.
It's not
I
just,
think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to level off somewhere as a nation. Like if we have 12 million now, I'm going to say it's going to be 7 million, maybe 8 million hunters, probably within the next 10 years. I mean, I think this data that we're looking at now coming out of COVID, there's this, you know, the statistical spike because nobody was working and the government was giving you money.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now inflation, has never been higher.
I mean, the archery industry had a terrible year in 2022.
Yeah,
Terrible. I mean, down like 20%.
Right. And I think it's going to continue that way, and we're going to have to figure out how to survive. That's my big fight, or my gripe in Pennsylvania with we're focused on recruitment rather than access. And I fear I don't think there's any other way around us losing hunters in PA. And I think what's going to happen when we hit that, 400,000 to 500,000 mark, probably where we'll end up, that they're going to say, here are your tags. Deer season starts October 5th and goes out January 10th, shoot what you bring type of deal. It's not going to be this whole
season,
really cool regulated seasons that we grew up with, which most of the, I'm talking about the whole Southeast at this point. That's the way it is. You go to South Carolina, it comes in August 15th and it goes out January 15th.
Hunt with whatever you want.
If you want to hunt with a 7 mag, hunt with a 7 mag. If you want to hunt with a bow, hunt with a bow. That will suck if it comes to PA, and I think it will eventually come to PA because they're not going to have any choice. They have to manage the population, and they're going to have cutbacks, right? They have overhead as far as how much staff they have. It's a regional.
Yeah, that's where I think that merger between the Fish and the Game Commission is probably going to be imminent,
right? I bet it's
because there's a lot of redundancy there.
Yeah,
and it'll suck. Yeah. When it gets to that point, but from an enforcement side, from a administration side, there's that's where the state's going to say, hey, listen, we got budget here. We got to figure out what to do with.
I had a post on social media, and I said something in those regards. And my buddy from Montana, and it's kind of like out west, right?
Sure.
Montana. I mean, it's he carries a bear tag, he carries an elk tag, he carries an either mule deer or whitetail tag, a deer tag. So you kind of shoot what you bring mentality. But then it's less than 400,000 hunters. And he wrote me in a text because he was watching. I mean, he was like, dude, you look like such a fool. And I probably did, right? But he never went to a PA hunting camp. He never saw, and there were people like, what do you care? Mind your own business. One guy, I remember, stay in your lane, I'm like, my lane, this is my lane, right? Like, what you do affects me, so I'm allowed to speak into this. I'm not saying, I'm the almighty. I'm just saying there's a different perspective out there. And, I said, dude, you have no idea because you didn't grow up this way. If you had, I know him very well, if you would have grown up the way I did in Pennsylvania, experiencing everything that I experienced like that, you would feel the exact same way.
Sure.
I guarantee it.
It's just a cultural difference.
It's a cultural difference, right? So that's why I'm so quote unquote hell bent on, man, we got to pay attention to what we're doing here for the longevity, because these short outcomes or these quick, well, hurry up and let's make everything legal so we get more people. I just don't see it as
and that's what I mean. These, and I know just from going to school, there's a lot of people that have moved from the conservation biology model into these departments, right? Which, let's be very clear, these conservation biology people are not the type of conservationists that we need at the game species level from a regulatory body. Okay? Put that aside for a second. Still, how can they be that naive to not be listening to the feedback that is out there? I mean, like you said, since COVID, right? Since fall of COVID, there's not been anybody that I haven't talked to that hasn't said at least one bad thing or experience-wise about, man, I've bounced from piece to piece last year, and I mean, I couldn't find a spot. I mean, I couldn't get away from people, or I didn't see shit, or every parking lot was full, whatever. I mean, and so I don't care if you're Iowa or you're Pennsylvania or you're Mississippi. The fact is this problem is happening anywhere. In fact, I want to say it was 2 years ago, Warburton and the hunting public guys basically got scolded by this turkey group of the Southeast for being the leaders, killing all of the turkeys across the country, essentially, by producing this content and showing people you could go to Georgia and Mississippi and all these places and killing turkeys, that it drove so many more people to turkey hunt and to wipe out these turkey populations. It's bullshit. Right? It's not the hunting public. It's the push from the agency of opportunity, and the fact that there's no more land. This is it.
Well, I think it's a little bit of everything. I do, like, I'm not saying the hunting public has a direct hand on it, but I think it certainly plays a part. I have a good close friend of mine who, since the hunting public and that YouTube show, has strictly started to hunt spring gobblers in Pennsylvania on public land. And 2 or 3 seasons ago, he sent me a text, did you kill a turkey type of deal? Yeah, I got one. And he followed up with, did you get it on private or public? And I was like, private, of course.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, Yeah.
Go figure.
Like it was like I didn't do something. You know what I mean? Like that's another thing. I'm like, people like, you know, the public landowners, you know, like I don't hunt public land because I don't have to, and I'm certainly not going to apologize for it. I mean, like,
it is
listen,
a weird thing,
and there is
man.
not very many of these public land users that if I gave them the opportunity to hunt my highly managed private land, that wouldn't take it. You know what I mean? Like,
That's what you would
come
think.
on,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and so I think because you know, they made hunting public land cool.
It is
right?
cool.
I mean,
it's super
that's-
cool.
But
It was cool. When you
Yeah.
could kill stuff.
And so maybe part of that evolution. I mean, we dig on Chris B sometimes because Chris puts out that public land killing that giant 187 in Kansas.
Dude, one time. Chris isn't even like was wanting to be known as like his public land advocate. He just was looking for a place to hunt in Kansas.
Killed a giant.
Happened to kill a giant and like it, you know, has a big following. So
And now
people
look
saw it.
at even this past year, dude, he couldn't even see a deer, let alone kill a giant, you know, and he had a fairly good rant about it. And
He
it's
hunted
like,
the same stand too.
yeah, and it's like, you know, and we see that when we're hunting public land, whether that's in Ohio or Illinois or Kansas, Kentucky. And so again, it's I think what people have to realize is like when you talk about the division inside of the hunters, like, man, I do not envy people who only have public land right now. And it's not because that it wasn't good deer hunting or good habitat. It's just there's so much pressure. There's nothing that'll kill deer faster than deer pressure, period. The moment that those people go onto that property and just start walking through and slopping through and stuff, doesn't matter how well you planned out your strategy. You're screwed.
And along with it, like my enthusiasm for hunting. It's like, because I know I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to see people.
Which is the whole point of going out there, is not to see people, to be in a tree stand, solitude, in that perch, waiting for that opportune moment. And then it's like, oh, there's a guy. You hear somebody rattling? Yeah, there's a guy down there.
I hunted public land. I hunted public and private, a good mix growing up, and part of the public land I hunted was a big chunk of ground when I was a kid, and it's like it means something to me. I'm very passionate about that piece of ground because I grew up there, you know, hunting it, and I go back every year, maybe in turkey season or in flintlock season. But 2 turkey seasons ago, I went back. I spent 3 days there, and I laughed because I spent 3 good days, you know, hiking the same hills I did. Like, I mean, it's you could do 3 to 5 miles pretty easy in there. I hunted it 3 mornings in a row, you know, from daylight to noon, 1 o'clock type of deal. And I saw 1 gobbler on the second day, and it was a mile up the road when I was leaving that afternoon on private land. I never heard a turkey, nor did I jump a deer in 3 days. And we're talking
and that's
early
not
spring.
by coincidence, man.
No, I mean, it was literally an ecological desert. You know, they hadn't cut any timber. There was no understory whatsoever.
Yep.
I mean,
Is that DCNR land?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's your other factor. Again, DCNR being separate from the other ones. They're managing for timber. Game Commission's managing for wildlife.
Right.
You know, and the two don't talk.
Right.
You know, and so essentially, you know, if it's not prime time to cut timber, we're not cutting it, even if the wildlife suffer.
Right. There was not a turkey to be called to on there in 3 days. Now, that's not saying it was, you know, maybe the 3rd week. So it's not saying there wasn't one there the first week that somebody killed. But, I mean, nothing like when I grew up there.
Think about if those agencies were combined. Those 3 agencies, DCNR, Fish Commission, Game Commission. Reduction of overhead. But then think of the power that those 3 entities could have. You know, think of the number of trout streams that go through state forest land, right? And accessibility and everything for that. Think of the number of forests that need to be managed for wildlife and timber. Like, you can manage for both, right? State doesn't need to manage. I mean, especially when we're in an oil and gas rich state, timber don't mean shit.
Right.
Like,
But they're still cutting timber on state game lands, which is good.
which they should, because they're doing it for habitat.
Habitat, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe the market's not as good for it, but it's for habitat.
Right.
But the state forests, no.
Not so ever. Right.
No. And so you start to look at all of these things and you realize, like, as a public land hunter, there's a lot of opportunities to go out there, but I mean, it's still a limited resource.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see another human, and I didn't hear a turkey or jump a deer. Like,
That's crazy.
yeah, it was.
I assume there was people there the first week or 2.
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just, I don't know.
Well,
man.
I mean,
It's-
most of the places that I used to hunt were old strip mines and stuff owned by coal companies or timber companies or whatever. And it was basically open ground. You do whatever you want. Now, not so much. It's all locked down, leased up, sold, whatever. And so all of those places that I grew up cutting my teeth on, they're locked down private.
right.
Can't go on them anymore. There's a little bit of game lands around them that you could go to, and that's about it. But I mean, it becomes, I think it's the same story that people start to hear over and over again, and I think if you're listening to this and you're public land hunting, like, you're probably nodding your head a little bit here. And it's not to discourage you, because I do think that, frankly, it may not be great, but when this crash happens in hunter licenses, those public lands will be great again. For sure.
It'll be good again.
Better.
Great.
That sounds like a hat.
Huge.
Make public land
Public
great again.
granted. How do we get that? We just stopped recruiting hunters.
The bucks are gonna be huge.
Yeah.
Bigger than ever.
It's going to be awesome.
When I'm done with this project, I'm not quite there yet. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that people have to look at. So, I don't know.
Well,
Anyways,
we won't fix it all today.
no, we won't. That's all I got.
That's all I have.
All right, that's it. Episode 116. See that, Nick? Paid attention.
In the books.
Ryan, we appreciate you stopping down, brother. Thanks for chatting with
Absolutely.
us.
Anytime.
And, we will catch you all next week.
Later.
Take me